I kept doing the same thing, taking the same jobs with the same results. And I'm like, I'm ready to make my $1 million. I'm ready to run this place. I'm ready. But I wasn't. Then I'd get fired or get let go or I didn't get hired.
Hey there, I'm Goli Kalkaran, and this is Lessons from a Quitter, where we believe that it's never too late to start over. No matter how much time or money you've spent getting to where you are, if ultimately you are not happy, then it's time to get out. If you're feeling stuck and you feel like there's gotta be more, there's gotta be a way to feel fulfilled and excited about what you do, then this is the podcast for you. Each week, I will sit down with an inspiring guest who quit their professional career in order to forge their own path and create a life that they love. Hello, and welcome back to another episode. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm so excited to have you here today, and you're in store for a really great episode with Will Day. We will talk to him all about how he has transitioned through numerous careers and now how he is a full-blown artist and what that means and what that entailed. We'll get into that in a second. I thought that, speaking with an artist today was timely to talk about a topic that I've seen come up for a lot of the people that I work with in my group program and just a lot of people in careers that are unhappy. And it's the concept of perfectionism. Now, for a lot of us that are in traditional careers, we have been raised in school systems and in careers where, there is a perfect score, like 100%, and you are taught to think a certain way and to model things and to try to get exactly a perfect score as much as you can or as close to it as possible. And when you go to work, we're often told exactly what to do. And, the closest we get to doing exactly what they tell us to do, the more sort of we're rewarded. And so these beliefs kind of become ingrained over the years that like you have to get it to be perfect. And when that translates into other areas of our lives and taking risks and doing things outside the box and really tapping into our creativity, becomes a huge block for a lot of us. And one thing that I want people to really understand is that perfectionism is only your fear of failure disguised. That's all it is. You are so scared to fail that you think if you can get it as perfect as possible, then you have less of a chance of failing, right? And to take it one step further, I don't really think that we have a fear of failure so much as we have a fear of failing in front of other people. We're so consumed with what other people are going to say and how they're going to judge us and what they're going to think that we would rather not even do the thing than to do it in a way that isn't good enough, right? And I think we think that if we get it as close to perfect as possible, then nobody can say anything, right? Nobody will be able to attack us. Now, when you think about this objectively for a second, you realize that that is impossible, okay? For every piece of artwork, for every movie, for every restaurant, for anything in this world, there are people that like it and there are people that hate it. It has nothing to do with that thing, right? We have different preferences, we have different pasts and biases and triggers and everything else. And we view the world in different ways, and what is going to be great for me isn't going to be great for you, and that's okay. But we still want everyone to love us. And we want everybody, we want to put something out and we want everyone to think unanimously that it's the greatest thing. And I think it stops so many people from taking a chance or doing something because they're so terrified that somebody else isn't going to like it. And so they keep working on it until it's quote unquote perfect. And the spoiler alert is that it will never be perfect. And you are hindering yourself from actually evolving and growing and getting to where you want to be because you're not putting this thing out there. And now I see it a lot with the people that I'm working with now, with people that want to transition into a side hustle or another career. It's like they just can't put out this thing because they're so scared of what other people are going to think. And so they keep tweaking it and they keep working on the logo and whatnot and doing all this other stuff that is unimportant because they want it to become perfect. And I think it's really important to become aware of those thoughts and really understand, what are you trying to do with that perfectionism? Why are you trying to make this thing perfect? And to take it one step further, I think that what we don't understand or we maybe don't recognize is that the things that we're worried about that other people are going to say about us are things that we already kind of think about ourselves, right? So if you are, let's say, great at something, okay, let's say for me, like I'm a good dancer. I know I am. I've danced my whole life. Like I have rhythm. I'm not the greatest, but I'm a good dancer. I'm not super concerned about people saying I'm a bad dancer. So if I'm like dancing, I'm not worried about making it perfect. If I heard somebody say that like I was a bad dancer, it wouldn't affect me that much because I would just be like, I don't know, did they actually see me dance? Because I don't think so, because I'm fairly confident in that skill, right? It comes with things that where I'm not confident. Let's say like, as another example, let's just say like I don't have a ton of confidence in my cooking skills, right? So if somebody's going to come over for dinner, I might be really worried and like want to make this meal perfect because like I'm worried they're going to think that it wasn't good. And the reason I'm going to think that is because I probably think that about my own cooking, right? And so I'm so nervous because I have these thoughts of my own inadequacy in that arena that I want to make it perfect. And I think obviously that happens a lot of times with things that we are new at. Like if you're going to start a new business, like you obviously don't have business skills. And so you're worried that people are going to say like, oh my God, like she doesn't know what she's doing and she's going to fail at this or she's not going to be able to sell or whatever because you think that about yourself. And I just think it's really powerful to even know those thoughts, to realize like, why am I trying to make this thing perfect when it will never be perfect and it's good enough? And what do I think about that? Because like if I can change my own thoughts and really come to a place where I think it's good enough, let's say like I want to put something out there, I want to put out a side hustle, and I get to a place where I'm really comfortable with this idea. And I think, you know what, this is good enough. Then I'm not as beholden and affected by what other people are going to say. And so I don't need to make it as perfect because I like what this thing is. And if someone else doesn't like it, which likely there are people that won't, I'm okay with that because I still like it. I think that it's just something that is worth being aware of, especially in your own life as you're trying to maybe branch out of a traditional career and you want to try something else. I think we so often think like, oh no, I'm just not ready. And we come up with an excuse like because my branding colors aren't ready or my website isn't as good as I want it to be. And I think it takes taking a step back to be like, your website's not the reason you're going to be successful or not, or like your business is going to take off or not. You can always tweak it. You can always add to it. Like, why am I hiding behind this website? What is the inadequacies that I feel? What is the thing that I'm trying to protect myself from? And what am I giving up by doing that, by waiting? So I think like that has helped me a lot in pushing myself with this podcast, in putting myself out there and getting to a place where I'm like, I like what I'm doing with the podcast. And I'm sure that there's a lot of people that don't. And that's great. And that's fine for them. And, each episode doesn't have to be perfect because it's just a conversation with me and some other person. So maybe the editing isn't the best, or maybe the sound on one of them isn't going to be great. And I'm okay with that. And I'm sure there's going to be people that listen to it that are going to be like, oh my God, this is so unprofessional. And maybe it is, but I would rather put it out there and affect the people that I can affect than to keep it to myself until it's all the way perfect. And that has helped me a lot in this journey. And I think it's just something to really be aware of if you want to branch out, if you want to do something, outside of what you're doing, or even if you just want to explore like for your own fulfillment. Like if you want to, we'll talk a lot today with Will about creativity and kind of exploring that. And I think everybody should. And it really requires letting go of this perfectionism in order to do that. And so with that, I think it's a good lead in to introducing my guest, Will Day, because he has spent, a number of years kind of pivoting until he found the thing that really was him, like his truest essence. We talk about how he went from the Peace Corps to Wall Street, which is not your typical path, how he spent a number of years in the financial industry and then went on to get his master's in architecture at Pratt Institute. He moved from New York to LA to work in architecture and real estate development, but he kept feeling like something was missing. And I think so many of us have this feeling like we aren't fulfilled. And we'll talk a lot about like that feeling of not fitting into this mold that other people are fitting into. And he struggled with that for a number of years. And he started painting after work and at night, behind his garage and outdoor spaces and anywhere he could to just kind of tap into that creativity. And it wasn't until a number of years later where he decided to go all in and he became a full-blown painter. And he has now worked as a painter for over a decade. You can find all of his art at willdayart.com. And I suggest you go take a look at it either on his website or at Will Day Art on Instagram. It's beautiful. But I love talking to him about not only this transition, but how we can all kind of embrace our creativity amidst the chaos of our lives. And I think he has so much wisdom in really uncovering who you truly are and allowing yourself to be that person. So without further ado, let's jump in and talk to Will. Hi, Will. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Great to be here. Thank you, Goalie.
I'm so happy to have you here. There's so much to cover in your journey and how you've, ultimately become a artist and all the amazing things you're doing in the world. But we like to start back kind of in the beginning and follow the trajectory of your career. So I know your career kind of began with a stint in the Peace Corps. So tell us how you kind of ended up doing that and what that experience was like for you.
I studied in college at Ohio Wesleyan University, international studies, and my French teacher went to the Peace Corps, Madame Fett, and she was so outspoken about giving back and being part of the community. And that sparked such a great curiosity. And I was like, you know what? She had a great influence on me. And I was like, I really wanted to go travel and see the world. And I thought the Peace Corps was a wonderful place to kind of find not ways to give back, but to be part of the world and learn something new.
That's awesome. So where did you end up and what was the type of work that you were doing?
I was assigned to North Africa, Tunisia, the Sahara Desert, just a little different place growing up in Connecticut.
Just a tad.
Just a tad. And I was assigned to be a community development agent. So that has a lot of different meaning behind it. But we had different jobs and tasks for that community. And really the goal of the Peace Corps is to connect to that local foundation of people and find ways to inspire, help, and add incredible, I think, inspiration for skill sets to help spark something new in that space.
So you do this for 2 years and then you are coming back to the States. And I feel like maybe this is the wrong image, but a lot of times the image that you have of someone that goes to the Peace Corps and the things they're wanting to do, they typically don't come back and then go to Wall Street. So how did you end up from Tunisia and the Peace Corps on Wall Street?
I always think about that. So I'm a person of extremes. I like going from one thing to the other. And because once I put myself into those places, I could really give it all my heart. And growing up in Connecticut, born in New York City, I was surrounded and influenced by a lot of the businesses in New York and Wall Street. And I was always curious to learn about the capital markets. But before I did that, I wanted to go travel and see the world. And the Peace Corps gave me that ability. And I was ready to come home and actually share my experiences, but also come back to a little sense of reality and figure out how to connect to my own community, make money, start living. And I liked and I really loved being in that environment.
And so what were you doing on Wall Street and how long did you end up staying in that position?
I was a financial sales rep for Bloomberg Financial Markets for former mayor Mike Bloomberg. And I was there for 3 years from 96 to 99. And it was one of the best experiences I could ever ask for.
Oh, really?
In so many ways. And so, the most important thing was I met my wife on Wall Street through there. So I was like, wow, thank you, Mike Bloomberg. You're the man. But, more importantly, it taught me how to connect to people, how to understand how deals are made, how to understand how to learn and know that the truth is we don't know everything. And finance is pretty complicated. And I wasn't a finance major, but I'm a people person. And being in Wall Street, it really taught me how to connect and also put myself out in vulnerable situations that I was scared and fearful. But it helped me overcome a lot.
That's wonderful. So then what made you leave that if you liked it?
I knew I was a creative spirit at heart. And I remember some of my bosses were like, hey, Willie, let's make this a little more creative for you. I'm like, yeah, let's make the spreadsheets really colorful and creative. It's like, no, we got to make some creative with the numbers here, Will. What are you doing? I was like, oh, is that what you mean about creativity? So I knew in my heart that I always wanted to be in some kind of visual environment. Bloomberg was incredible because it's a media company, as well. So that really enhanced kind of my curiosity. So I loved it there because there was so much going on, and it created so many different buzzes and activity of things and events going on in the world, from news to media to finance to deal making to travel. So I love that. But I knew, I was like, hey, I actually want to use my hands. I want to connect back to people like I did in the Peace Corps.
Right. And so what did you decide to do after Wall Street?
So I was like, hey, before 9/11, I was like, hey, I'm going to go back and get my master's in architecture and at Pratt in New York. It was right around the corner. And I was like, hey, that's a great way to do that, because I thought it was a good business transition, but also it'd be a great education for me to apply my skills in finance, but also be creative about how to design things.
Okay, so you get your master's, and I mean, did you have, like, before that, was there like a love of architecture that you had, or what led you to that specific field?
My wife used to ask that question. So like, when I said I'm going back to school, she's like, oh, awesome. What business school? Maybe Columbia, maybe NYU. I'm like, how about architecture school? She's like, wait a minute, where is that coming from? I was like, I know. She's like, I know you're creative, but I mean, that was somewhat of a surprise, but it wasn't radical. So, I just was working through my impulses of how to really kind of be a creative spirit. And I thought that was the next platform for me to be professional, responsible, but also find a profession that could really suit all my different needs.
So, I mean, I know, and we'll get to obviously the fact that you're a painter now. And so did you grow up doing like painting or doing art? And did you see part of, I guess, in architecture, you are drawing. So was it that appeal that you're doing some kind of, drawing, art related work?
I think, yeah. I mean, I always knew I was creative. And, when I was really young in middle school and obviously high school, I had that urge. I knew I could draw, I could paint, I could photograph, I could tell stories visually. So I didn't know that was going to turn into a profession, but I'm using these buzzwords as a visual storyteller because that's really what I was hungry to do. And so architecture really gave me the incredible foundation to do that. And I didn't really know that because I was so in my head and I was so technical, and it was, like all this engineering. I'm like, oh, I hate math. Oh my gosh, get me away from numbers. People are like, you are in Wall Street. What's your problem? I was like, I know, right? I mean, look at me. I'm no Gordon Gekko, but let me tell you.
Yeah, it's just funny because I think a lot of us are so like hungry to find something that we love doing, but we think we have to fit it within a certain box. So it's like, well, I love art, but I still have to be a professional. So I guess I'll try to find the next best thing instead of like really just pursuing, the art or what it is. And so I see this all the time, especially with people that are doing career changes, is once you've kind of gone the traditional route, you think that you have to like get another degree in something else, and maybe that will be better. I see this all the time. Like lawyers, like, well, maybe I should just go get my MBA, or maybe I should, go get my master's in become a psychologist because I like helping people. And I'm like, well, maybe you should figure out what it is you want to be doing instead of like getting another degree. And so I'm wondering, like, was that sort of what led you to getting a master's in this? Is like, maybe this will be more in line with what I want.
Exactly. I was lost, Goalie, and I was like, what do I do? And I know I want to be creative, but also, hey, going in a master's is going to get me more money, and it's going to give me more credibility. And I'm very insecure right now. And I'm not saying it was a fantastic move, and it was the right move at the time for me to do that, because I'm parlaying all those incredible skills. And Pratt was a fantastic design school / architecture school. So yes, I kind of woke up in the middle of school saying, oh, actually, this is actually working, but it's not going to pay what I used to be paid. So, whoa, we got to figure that out now.
And so how did you figure that out? I mean, did you end up going just straight back to school full time, or were you working while you were in school?
Good question. I went back full time. To get a master's in architecture, you need 3 years. And, I just got married and my wife was still working on Wall Street. And I remember she was like, hey, wow, you're going to go back to get your master's in architecture. That's so great. It pays a lot, right? I'm like, oh, yeah, don't worry about it. Yeah, I'm going to kill it. And she's like, oh, good. Meanwhile, back in my mind, I'm like, uh-oh, shit. I better figure this thing out immediately because I'm spending a lot of money. So to answer your question, my wife, Amy, yes, she stayed working. She supported our lifestyle big time. And she married this creative spirit, but she, knew that she fell in love with this guy who was hungry for life and obviously loved her. But I mean, the whole thing was when I said, hey, I'm going to go back and get my master's in architecture. She's like, what? I was like, well, how do you like me now? I'm not going to make any money. And you fell in love with me. So you ready for this journey? She's like, oh boy.
Okay. So then you get your master's and what do you do next? Did you get a job as an architect?
Yes. And so, as I just said, the lesson here for me is when I jump in and change anything or quit or decide to move forward, I try to go full speed in the next direction. And I'm not saying that's the answer for everybody. So I went and got a job after graduating from Pratt in 2004 with a large architectural firm called Gensler. And I moved our family from New York City to California, Los Angeles. And so that was kind of a shaker.
Yeah.
But my son was born in LA, 4 or 5 months after we moved there. And, my wife's like, hey, what about me? I got the job here in New York. What about you? You're like half-assing it. I'm like, no, I'm not. I got a great job in Los Angeles. She's like, well, it doesn't even pay half what we need. I'm like, but how do you like me now again? She's like, I don't like you. I was like, we'll figure this out. So she stayed in work while I was transitioning. So the message here was she trusted me and she knew that, we're all going to have to put our time in to help each of us find our passions. And my passion was really screaming about being a creative spirit in the world. And I still didn't know what that meant.
First of all, your wife sounds incredible and she deserves an award. But so then you go and you start working in LA. And so how does the transition happen from architect to painter?
I think, there are all these moments that happen. And I remember specifically, I was working on a job site in Los Angeles in downtown for a massive project for the Avenue of the Stars in Century City, which a lot of people know. Yeah. And I was just a project manager. And I remember I was just managing materials and the budgets, and that's awesome. But I was like, I'm not really being creative. Mm-hmm. And that was my interpretation. And then I was like, at the end of that day, I lived in Santa Monica, and I went to an art store there. I don't know if it was Blick Art Store, and I decided to just go buy a massive raw canvas. I just had this urge, and I went right there and bought this huge canvas, and I stuck it and drilled it to the back of my garage. And that night, I just started painting. And I was like, wow, I've never done that. Wow. And so, you asked what was the transition. The transition was I was following my heart to say, I need to do something different. And I'm a pretty impulsive guy, so I act on things sometimes very randomly. And that's hard for the family because all of a sudden I'm here and then next thing at 4 a.m, I'm gone, being creative. So anyway, to answer your question, I learned so much about being on the job sites in architecture that I used to love all the construction and the tools and the drywall and how things kind of put together and how they use materials and colors and shapes to make these incredible compositions and designs. And so was one of the best training grounds an artist could ever ask for.
I mean, I love that you did this. And I think a lot of times, so many of us in the traditional world aren't really that impulsive. And I think to just learn to suppress these impulses, but giving yourself some space to just play and explore and follow curiosity is such an important part of just joy in life. But I mean, I think for so many people that are trying to find what that thing is, it's you're not going to think your way to it. It's literally just doing things and seeing what resonates.
I think you're right. I mean, my initial thought is, how do you stay curious throughout your entire life? And, that's what I'm trying to still figure out too. Yeah, I've changed my entire life with my family and I changed the ship around. We went 360 degrees in a totally different direction now being a painter. But I've always known that I wanted to run my own business, be an entrepreneur, be creative. I didn't know how to do that.
Right. Okay. So you get this painting, and I think it's one thing to decide, like, hey, I want this outlet, or I'm going to have this hobby and I like painting, and I'm going to put something in my garage and I'm going to start painting. It's a whole nother thing to say, like, I'm not going to work anymore at a traditional job, and I'm going to do this full time. So how did that transition work for you?
I think it was really hard. I remember one day my wife and I were in LA, and she's like, "What's going on?" I remember it was like 3 a.m. when I was painting outside. She's like, "Hey, time to come in. We got kids." I'm like, "What?" She's like, "You got to get up and go to work." I'm like, "Oh gosh, do I really?"
Yeah.
Of course I did. I mean, the transition kind of occurred over time. It wasn't like a jolt of lightning, like, "Oh, done, time to quit my job." And, everybody has a very different scenario. I mean, for me, I had a family to support. We had a mortgage. We had, expectations. We, at the time, basically had, 2 kids. And I was depressed. I was sad. I wasn't the person God created me to be. And I was shocked because I was like, I'm healthy. I'm energetic. I'm a workaholic. I'm like, what is going wrong with me? So, I mean, I think the answer is it took a team of people to kind of help support the dream. All right. It wasn't because I was the most talented artist in the universe. I didn't even want to be an artist. I wanted to be a creative spark to influence the world around me, no matter what job it was. And, I wasn't like, hey, I've studied painting my whole life. I can't wait to be a painter and be in the Museum of Modern Art. I was like, I can't wait to be independent and free and creative and really connect to people in my community to inspire them and, create something that's going to be timeless for the world.
I love what you just said, because I think so many of us in this like modern world feel this, and a lot of people don't know what to do. But I think so many of us have like fit ourselves, like I said, into a mold that we're supposed to be. And we have these jobs and we're depressed and, we're unhappy and we don't know why, because like you were saying, like from the outside, you look in and you're like, well, I have what everyone says I should have to be happy. I have my health. I have a beautiful family. I have healthy children. I have this beautiful house and a mortgage and a good paying job. And, I can whatever, go on a vacation or whatever it is. And yet I feel like my soul is dying and I don't know how to, and I think so much of it is one, just getting over the guilt of feeling like you should be grateful and just really kind of getting real with yourself of like, what is it that your soul wants? What is it that's going to make you like kind of come alive? But like, how did you get, I know you say you have this team, but I mean, I think there has to be the inklings where you start realizing like, I don't want to be doing this. I don't want to be going into work anymore. I don't want to be, and so like, how did you start kind of realizing that I am depressed in this or I'm unhappy and I need to figure out what I want to do?
So let me take a quick step backwards on that so you get to understand the context. How did I do that? Well, basically, I was being let go from jobs. I was being fired. I was not in the right place. So all those kind of stories, which you haven't heard, have kind of led me to this place where, yeah, I was scared. I was afraid. I was depressed because I wasn't being the best me I could be. And I was either let go. It's the wrong place at the wrong time. We also experienced a lot of trauma and tragedy in 9/11, which, my wife worked on Tower 2 in the 78th floor.
Oh, wow.
And escaped, was late to work, and the second plane went right through her conference room.
Oh my gosh.
And so a lot of this, I bring that up because it's part of kind of our fear in the world. And our fear was I wasn't ready to tackle things that I should have because I was being held back from all the stuff that I kept in me. And it held all of us back. And it's hard. So I bring that up because I kept doing the same thing, taking the same jobs with the same results. And I'm like, I'm ready to make my $1 million. I'm ready to run this place. I'm ready. But I wasn't. Then I'd get fired or get let go or I didn't get hired.
Right.
So that was the spark to say enough. And, my kids were young and my wife was like, hey, there's a cycle going on here. Maybe you should think about I married someone different. Obviously in that time of trauma, but she saw me way before that. And she's like, I want that guy. And I said, I want that guy too.
Right.
And then she's like, hey, you should have stayed at Bloomberg. You were rocking it there. Yeah, it was. I loved it because I was around wonderful people and they made me look good and they
Right.
inspired me.
Mm.
Okay. Trust me. The company's great. The people, I'm still friends with them. You see, and then I was like, I need to take a risk. I needed to get out of that because that's what my spirit was telling me. And then by doing that, then I started spiraling down to the wrong places. But obviously, as you know, I'm here and it woke
Right.
me up,
Right.
15 years later.
Yeah. Oh, that's so important. I mean, I think so much of what you just said, like, I'm so sorry that you guys went through that trauma with 9/11. It's so powerful. And a lot of times it is things like that, unfortunately, for so many of us, where it is a health scare or a death in the family or a death of a close friend or things like that, where it wakes you up to realize like all of these things that we think are important are not important, like the high fancy job or the title or whatever, it's like none of that is what makes you happy. But unfortunately, even though we know that, like it's not like these stories aren't said. It's just that until it happens to us and it wakes us up of like, what am I doing here? Like, why am I spending my time doing something
Yeah.
I hate? And the other thing I love that you just said, and I think so many people probably feel this, is again, when you're trying to fit yourself maybe into a mold that you don't fit in. You start thinking there's something wrong with you, or you start becoming depressed because it's like, why am I not good enough to like everybody else? And there is that Albert Einstein quote of like, if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it'll live its whole life believing that it's stupid. And I think that is just so true, where it's like, if you were judging yourself based off like what, you're going to these jobs and you're saying it's the same job and you're getting the same outcome and it's not working for you. And like, luckily, I mean, you had this wonderful support system around you. You have a team. You had this creative ability. You had the courage to say, like, I'm going to take this risk, because so many of us just keep kind of like running into this wall and then thinking there's something wrong with us, thinking like, I'm just not smart enough. I'm not good enough. I'm not dedicated enough. I don't have enough goals, or whatever the BS story is we tell ourselves. And it's like, no, you're just in the wrong place. You're
Yes.
not meant to be in that place. And so I love that message. I love that and thank you for sharing. I think it's not easy to share like, hey, I was being let go. I wasn't making it work, because I think a lot of times we're just taught to feel shame around stuff like that, which is just ridiculous. So, I know you said there wasn't like just a moment. So how did you become like a full-blown artist? Did you start doing it on the side where you're like, I'm going to sell some paintings and see if this works? Or was it like, you got let go and you're like, hey, I'm going to go all in?
Yeah. I think there's an aha moment for everybody, as Oprah says. And, I appreciate that spirit, because I was let go from certain jobs, architectural jobs and financial jobs. And I remember in 2008, we decided to move from Los Angeles to California, from Los Angeles to Boulder, Colorado, where I live now. And the moment was, I was still working as an architect, transitioning, painting on the side, like you said, but I wasn't all in. And I remember, here we go again, 2008, we all understand what happened there. The economy tanked. And there's Will, who just moved his whole family from LA to Boulder, Colorado, for a lifestyle. And then I was let go from my architectural firm, like a lot of people. And there I was, 2008, new house, mortgage, kids in school, like, wow, hey, Aim, how do you like me again? She's like, what is going on? It's like, I know, this is a shitstorm. This is enough. I swear I'm going to try everything I can. So the moment was, I'm very depressed now. And I went down to my basement and I started to paint. And the basement became my vessel for inspiration and hope. And then I remember that year, 2008, 2009, during that tough economy, I wasn't working. My wife had to go back again. She's like, this is really not making me like you. I was like, I know. How about that? I'm just staying home throwing paint, right? Coolest guy ever. Everybody's like calling me up. Let's go out and rip it up, Will. I'm like, no, it's not happening.
Yeah.
So I entered a downtown arts fair in Boulder and I won one of the Blue Ribbon Awards.
Wow.
And so at that point, I said, I can do this. And so I give Boulder, the community, a lot of credit for lifting me up without me even knowing it and encouraging me and saying, we're here for you and we're here for all of you if you're doing the right thing and you have the right heart and the right intentions. And from that moment on, I never looked back.
Now you've been an artist full time for over a decade. 10,
I
11
know,
years. That's
right?
incredible. That is incredible.
Wow, I feel so old. Oh, golly.
That's
I mean, that's why it's like
amazing.
milestones, all of us, as you tell
Yeah.
your listeners, it's a decade. And I say, wow, I still feel like I just woke up,
Right.
finally, found myself. But I hate saying that. I said, because once you find yourself, you still have a lot of responsibility. Your journey is just
Oh,
beginning.
absolutely. And yeah, I think the biggest thing is that like again, like it's so cliche. It's like it's not the destination, it's the journey. But it's cliche for a reason. But I think it's like we keep thinking like once I get there, like once I become this. And it's like, no, there is no there. Like it's all like even for you, okay, like this is this decade you've been doing this. Like who knows the next 10 years, like who knows what this transforms because it's just hopefully, if you get to live another day, it's a continuous journey that you're changing every single day. You're pivoting small pivots. Maybe it's not a huge, pivot, but it's just still unfolding. And I love that. But do you have any advice? Like, can you tell us a little bit for people that like maybe want to become a creative in a bit creative business? Maybe it's art. Maybe they want to sell like different types of, of their art. How did you start making this more of a business? Like, how did you start? Like, I know your art is now all over the world, in private homes, in public places. And so like, how did you start navigating that or learn how to, the business side of it?
Very important because I first said to myself, okay, wow, I could paint, I could be creative, but then how do I execute on that idea? How do I run my own business? So the first thing I did was I formed a board of directors, and I put together 5 incredible business leaders.
Wow.
And who were kind of very select in their skill sets. Mm-hmm. And so they helped me think through like, hey, you want to be an artist? Great. What does that really mean? And so every quarter we would meet and talk about some of my needs. And, the basic thing, like most business leaders are like, well, I need a recurring revenue. I need to pay my bills. I got to figure out, well, what's your product? How does your product? And I don't want to speak like that because I'm trying to provide inspirational stories and contents through mark making on canvases. But I realized one of the board members was like, hey, Will, we have a new office. We can't afford to buy all these paintings. How about we lease your art? So we started to have a leasing program. And from all these different companies, they helped generate leads and opportunities where I was able to generate revenue each month, but also was able to generate content and create a whole new body of work. And they would really push me really quickly and set deadlines and timelines. So that question was, I needed help, and I reached out to 5 individuals, and they were all, some still my best friends, and helped launch Will Day Art.
Oh my God, I love that so much because I think, first of all, we try to white knuckle through everything and we try to do everything ourselves. And I think there's so much to be learned from different arenas. And I think most people, maybe as artists, don't think about like a board of directors because that's, typically in a business sphere. But it's such a smart thing because like you were saying, I mean, it provides accountability, like they're pushing you to do things. And it's a network effect, right? Somebody has like, they have needs and they'll introduce you to other people. But it's also like, that's where you get other ideas, like thinking outside the box. Like maybe if you were just painting by yourself in your basement, trying to like sell these online, you wouldn't have thought about leasing your art to office spaces, and that creates an entirely different like revenue stream that you may not come up with on your own. And so it's so important, like even if you're doing something creatively, to like be around other people and share ideas and get help and have accountability and do all these things that will kind of move the needle forward as opposed to just trying to do it on your own.
That's exactly right. I mean, I hate asking for help, and that, remember, these board of directors, as I call them, they're my friends. They were business leaders. They weren't artists. I'm coming from the financial community. Right. I didn't know anything about art, but I knew how to connect with people, and I'm trying my best to understand the art world, which I completely appreciate and really love.
Right.
But, I'm an outsider, that's trying to just share my story with the world that is inspiring, that also can reflect on our moment of the day and have paintings that reflect these emotions and experiences that we've all been through.
Yeah.
So
what has been maybe the hardest part or something that was surprising for you? I mean, I know there's always like these I don't know how to say it. Like it's like the stereotype of like the starving artist. I know
Yeah.
it's like being hard to be an artist because it's not that easy to sell these paintings and stuff. But I'm just wondering, is there, for somebody that wants to kind of get into this work, is there something that you wish you had known before you'd started?
Whew. I wish I started earlier,
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, I love that.
So what I would say is, and what everybody always told me is just be yourself. You're not in there to sell $1 million paintings or get on, Oprah or be in the Museum of Modern Art. There are always going to be people there. But if you can truly be yourself, the world will listen and you will transform so many people and inspire them. Now, that's idealistic, I understand. But the other thing that was really hard is don't be afraid to open yourself up to the world around you. So the first thing I was like, hey, I'm going to be a painter. Oh, I can't wait to be sensitive now. My wife's like, you are so sensitive. I'm like, I know. That was such a surprise. And I was like, well, if I'm really going to go in, I got to kind of open up my heart to all my issues. And, and I want to be receptive to the world. So now I'm like, I'm receiving all these incredible things in the universe and I'm trying to interpret or translate and feel it. So don't be afraid to allow yourself to be open up to that and do not be weighed down by expectations, as you talked about, and of other people's things that they want you to do. Once you let go of your expectations, you can actually start living and being that person that you wanted to be. Once I realized that, shedding all my expectations, embracing all life's kind of disruptions and changes were the ways I was able to finally find my creativity in the chaos, as I said in my TED Talk.
Yeah, everyone should check out that TED Talk. I will link to it in the show notes in case people like write it down. But I mean, you could always just Google Will Day TED Talk, and it's incredible talk. And I would love to like touch on that for a minute because I know you talk a lot about like the creativity in the chaos and the fact that life is just chaos. I mean, it's just always, it's not like it's, maybe we have it under control and we want to control things so much. And it's like, it's just, I don't know when we're going to learn that you're not going to control life. But I wonder what your thoughts for people who don't feel like they are naturally creative. I'm really questioning this because I used to be one of those people that used to always say like, I don't have a creative bone in my body and I'm not. And now I'm realizing my creativity comes out in different ways. And things that I didn't consider creative are actually pretty creative, but I just didn't think of it that way. And so I don't know, what are your thoughts on like people that maybe don't want to do it as a profession, but like using creativity in order to just be able to make it through this life?
Yes, absolutely love that. To answer that question, so remember, I don't want to just be a painter. I want to be the most creative spirit in the universe. So
no pressure.
No, yeah. I mean, thank you. So what I would say is that, life is chaotic, and my job is not to control all that chaos, but to recognize it and allow those disruptions and chaos to really not weigh me down, but also bring me up so that I can wake up and then absorb all the things to kind of dive into and not put all these barriers in front of me. So, I want to be a creative spirit. Hopefully I'm going to be painting the rest of my life, but hopefully I'm going to be creative in everything I do.
Yeah.
My relationships, writing, speaking, poetry, exercise, health. So, I think there's certain things that wake us all up, but creativity, remember, uses all these disruptions around us to shed layers of expectations, as I talked about.
Yeah.
And if we let that happen, you will be a wonderful role model and you're going to inspire the people around you.
Absolutely. It's a really great way to cope with all the chaos. It's an outlet, I feel like, dealing with what the ups and downs in life. So I feel like when you're trying to control everything, you're always bracing yourself. You're always like trying to just survive, I think. But like once you embrace that chaos and you kind of use it as like, okay, the ebbs and flows of everyone's life, it becomes more enjoyable.
Yes. And I love what you just said. You and I are not here just to survive.
Right.
I know God planted all of us, whoever you believe in, to be the best you can be. And I'm not here just to be a painter. I'm here to, obviously share my love with the universe and be all these other things. And I know God wants us all to be the best we can be. Mm-hmm. So if you keep that in mind, you're not going to limit yourself because you're going to accomplish one thing and then you're going to be able to do something else.
Right.
Just like you coming in, starting this incredible podcast, you had a lot of fear and you're scared, and look what you're doing now.
Thank you.
And then it's going to go on and be even better. It's like, so, you and I look back at these moments and say, yeah, we're talking, we've overcome certain things, but for both of us, I think we have been very scared and reluctant to kind of push ourselves out there. And
absolutely. It's such a good point, because I think it's easy to look at other people and think like, oh, well, he knew always how to paint, or like he had this creative, he probably wasn't scared, or like I'll do it once I'm not scared. And I think that the reality is like, you're never not scared. Like the fear doesn't go away. You just like learn how to kind of push through it. And so I wonder, like, did you, have this experience? I mean, I wonder if you have this experience now, like, even though you've been doing it for 10 years, I mean, like, are you still, there's times where you're like afraid of like, is this going to keep working? Do I, how do I keep this going?
Oh boy. I just had that conversation this morning with Amy, my wife. And I was like, yeah, at the end of the year, here we are, almost November. And yeah, I'm very scared. I work on commission paintings. I create art for people, companies, from, art shows, for galleries. And I'm like, wow, what am I going to do? Like, what's next? But what's next is to still be true to yourself. And what's next is that this is one of my mantras, I want to walk in love and live in grace. And that is something that reminds me of why I'm painting. Why did I even quit my job? Something wasn't working. So we all have to remind ourselves, when you overcome something so great, don't forget that journey.
Yes.
And I hate saying that, but remind yourself every day that when it is bad, and there's days where I'm lonely in my studio, I'm like, I'm painting mud. Right. This thing looks like a stick figure. Who's going to buy this for $1 million? I don't know. Golly, I am like panic. And I have to step back and either, pray, meditate, or just rest.
Yeah.
Or take a nap and say, we're here for a reason. And there's a purpose, and there's a reason why you and I are speaking. And every day I do get scared. I get afraid, but I don't want to let that fear continue to come and take over. So whatever your mantra is, I have to encourage it, because it exists within every one of us, no matter what position and what level you're at.
Absolutely. I mean, if you just learn to ignore it a little better, you just learn to like quiet it down, like it's always there, but it just becomes easier. And once you've done it a couple times and you realize like, hey, world isn't going to swallow me up. I'll be fine. I can figure it out. It kind of gives you that confidence to keep doing it the next time. But I loved what you just said about remembering what you've gone through. Because I think that, there is all these biases that we have. It's just the way that our brains are wired. And we tend to like look at the negative. We tend to look at this open loop bias in psychology, where you remember everything that is basically left undone. So the things that are open loops, we tend to remember more often than things that are completed. And so that's why you remember like the stress of like all the stuff that you haven't done. And I think that also relates to the fact that like we blow up everything that we failed at. We remember a lot more than all these accomplishments we've had, all the amazing stuff we do. We just like kind of like, oh, that's not a big deal. Or, oh yeah, I can paint. It's not that great. And I recently heard someone say that they make a badass list, and they literally write down every like badass moment they've had in their life, so that they can go back and like look and be like, hey, I am a badass. Like I can do that. I've done all this other stuff. And I think whatever it is that, helps you, but just remembering like, I have been through so much. I have done so many things I've accomplished. Like on a daily basis, we do so much that we just don't even think about like how much we can get done. And I think that kind of helps get through some of the times where you're like, what am I doing?
And I totally agree with that. Every day I try to remind myself to write certain things down, right? Because I get stuck, and the flow of creativity doesn't always work so easily. But the one thing I recommend everybody is, I remember one of the books I read when I was just starting off, and it's from one of my favorite authors. Her name is Shakti Gawan, and it's called Creative Visualization. And it's what I, besides having faith, I use that as a mantra, where I try to use the power of my imagination to create what you want in your life. Yeah. I know God wants you to do that, but he wants you to think out of the box and kind of be playful. But you have to imagine some of these things that are going to happen, and don't always imagine the worst.
Right.
If you have that creative visualization, I guarantee you, not maybe the first day or two, but you will start seeing your life transformed like no other situation. And it takes time.
Right.
So
I love that. I love that. I actually think that's a great idea. I do a lot. And now you see it all over, like all these like high business, business leaders and stuff. Everybody does visualizations in meditation and stuff because it is really powerful. I mean, we all know our minds are super powerful and they create your reality. It creates your perspective. Like, as you know, that's why gratitude practices are so abundant now, because like if you focus on that, like then you start seeing all of the great things in your life. And so I think it's the same thing. If you use that visualization to really see what you want, it's amazing how it starts manifesting. Well, this has been wonderful. I really appreciate you taking the time. Where can people find you if they want to follow along with your artwork, if maybe they want to reach out and connect?
The best place is on the website, willdayart.com. But Instagram is what I use a lot to communicate through at willdayart. Those are kind of the two main kind of sources, but I'll do shows and exhibits around the country mostly. And they are all kind of listed on the website. And so
wonderful. Well, I will link to all of those so that people can find it in the show notes. I can't thank you enough. This has been wonderful.
I'm glad to talk with you, and it's great to be part of this podcast. So I appreciate your vision as well.
Oh, thank you. How awesome is Will? I loved talking to him. And here are my 3 takeaways. It's okay if you don't fit into the mold. So often we make ourselves so miserable trying to do everything that society thinks we should do. But it's okay to be yourself. And I know that's cliche, but if you can be yourself, the world will listen. Number 2 is closely related to that. And I loved when he said that once you let go of all of the expectations, then you can truly let yourself be who you're supposed to be. And 3, find creativity in the chaos. Our job is not to control the chaos, and I think we've all learned that we can't do that. But it's to recognize it, and instead of drowning in it, let it lift you up. Let it bring out the creativity that all of us have within us. If you like this episode, make sure to reach out to Will on Instagram at willdayart and let him know. And I'll be back next week with another episode. Thank you so much for listening. I can't tell you how much it means to me. If you liked the podcast, please rate and review us on iTunes. It'll help other people find the show. If you want to connect or reach out, follow along on Instagram and Facebook at Lessons from a Quitter and on Twitter at Quitter Podcast. I would love to hear from you guys, and I'll see you on the next episode.